Welcome to DraftKings Omniscience. This is at the NFL Week 2 on DraftKings, and we're gonna talk about running backs for Week 2. And as you might already be able to tell, there are a lot of running backs that I'm looking at this week. And instead of talking about just value picks this week, I'm going to talk about all running backs that I like: high price, low price, in between, everything. So I think I have about 15 running backs that I'm really looking at, and I'm not going to be concentrated on all of them, obviously. I'm not going to be spread out evenly on all of them. I'll be using more some than others, and as I talk about the players, I'll explain which ones. So these are all categorized by price too. Matt Forte is the most expensive, so I'm not categorizing these by my top picks or who I'm using the most. I'm categorizing this by player price on DraftKings. So on DraftKings, Matt Forte is at 7,700, and he's the highest priced player that I have in lineups for Week 2. I'm probably gonna fade Adrian Peterson completely. Just didn't seem. I remember reading the preseason that he said he didn't feel like himself, and he's expensive. He's kind of expensive too, and I'd rather take Matt Forte or Marshawn Lynch over Adrian Peterson. But anyway, yeah. So Matt Forte at the top of the list in price. I remember reading the preseason that it said that they were going to try and run him more, but if you go onto Rotoworld and check out what they say there, it sounds like they're going to use him a lot in as a receiving back as well, which I kind of figured. I mean, he excels at that, so it's not too surprising that he's still going to catch a lot of balls. And of course, remember, DraftKings is a full point per reception, so any running backs that catch balls are worth a lot more than running backs that don't. And they have a lot more potential to score that 30 points that you'd love every player on your team to have. So Matt Forte, I don't have Jeremy Hill in a lot of lineups. Actually, I don't know if I have him in any yet for Week 2, but I will be putting him in some because when I was reading a little bit more about the Bengals, someone mentioned that, I think it was an article on Rotoworld actually too, so more than just looking at player profiles, check out the articles for the NFL on Rotoworld. They seem pretty good. Some of them seem a little bit like the information's a little not isn't so great. But I remember the one article did mention how the Bengals offensive line is really good. So if there's any Bengals fans out there to confirm that, that'd be great. But also, when I thought about Jeremy Hill a second time, I kind of remembered that last week the Bengals really just blew out the Raiders. So they didn't really need to use Hill that much, which is why I think he split so many carries with Giovanni Bernard, and why Giovanni Bernard got 14 touches for 88 yards last week. But even still, Hill is the goal line back, so he's going to get the touchdowns if they're in the red zone. So. And also they're playing the Chargers at home this week, so it should be a closer game, and that's one of the reasons why I still like Hill, but I don't have him in a lot of lineups because I like other running backs around his price better, like Matt Forte. And next up is Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn Lynch is at 7,200 this week, and he's kind of the focal point of the offense for the Seahawks. And he performed really well last week against a very good defense on the road. And this week he's going up against the Packers. It's a division game. They're going to need him to step up. They're going to need him to have more touches. And the Packers got lit up by Matt Forte last week. Matt Forte rushed for 141 yards. And on 24 carries, and there's no reason to think that Marshawn Lynch can't do that too. So yeah, I like Marshawn Lynch a lot this week. I have him in a decent amount of lineups. And as you can, this week, typically I'd pick 2 running backs, and I only take 2 running backs, and I usually go with 4 wide receivers. But this week, I think I'm going to make a lot of lineups with 3 running backs because there's a lot of value at the running back position. And these running backs could have really nice low floors and high ceilings, such as Marshawn Lynch and Matt Forte. Their floor should be pretty high, and their ceilings should be pretty good as well. But of course, they're also the more expensive players, so you have to kind of be a little discerning at what players you want to mix and match. So next up, kind of more of like a medium price is Justin Forsett. He is 6,200 this week, and he's going up against the Raiders, and he's really the only running back for the Ravens. So unlike the Bengals, who had Giovanni Bernard to split carries with Hill, it really is just Justin Forsett. But what was a little upsetting last week was that the Ravens did give the rookie Allen 10 carries. Not sure why. I mean, he didn't really do much of anything with those carries. So, I'm hoping it wasn't like Justin Forsett was hurt or anything. It doesn't sound like that. So yeah. I mean, he's a pretty easy pick against the Raiders. He does get some receptions, not a ton, but when you pick a running back that's playing the Raiders, you're probably not going to you probably won't get a lot of receptions out of that running back. That's the only downside. I could be eating my words with that, but at the same time, offenses don't want to take chances with drop passes going to the running backs when they can just burn the clock by running the ball. So yeah, he's a good price at 6,200. Then of course Mark Ingram. Again, this is another blowout game. The Saints are at home. They're 10-point favorites. They're projected to score about 28 points. So there's a lot of points to go around. And if the Buccaneers get creamed as bad as they did against Tennessee, as New Orleans, and there's no reason to think that there's going to be a lot of points to go around with Mark Ingram and other players on the Saints. Ingram also is worth more if Spiller isn't out. If Spiller isn't playing, I think Spiller is possibly playing, but it doesn't sound very good, and it doesn't sound like he'll be used very much. And Ingram last week did get some nice receptions, so he did add. He had 8 receptions for 98 yards. Now that was against the Cardinals, and they were down. So again, I mean, those receptions, don't expect to get 8 receptions this game against the Buccaneers when the Saints are up like 2 or even 3 touchdowns. They're just going to run the ball. So yeah, but at 5,900, he's a good price for the running back position. Yeah, Lamar Miller's on my radar. I mean, he had a really disappointing week 1, but again, the Dolphins' offensive line is pretty weak right now. So my thinking last week was that Lamar Miller was going to get some receptions or get more receptions out of the backfield, and he only got 1, and he only rushed 13 times, so he only got 14 touches in a game that I would have thought they would have won by more than 7. I really thought the Dolphins were kind of going to blow out the Redskins week 1, but they didn't. The Redskins defense, at least their run defense, might be pretty, seems pretty respectable. But Lamar Miller this week 2, he's going up against the Jaguars, so pretty easy pick there as far as. I mean, he should. I would think he's going to get 20 touches at least against the Jags, but I could be wrong. But and again, he underperformed last week big time, so a lot of people might not be taking him, and he's only 5,500. So that is the upside. That is appealing to me, at least, that the less people that take this player and he has like a 20, 30-point game, all the better for me. So next up, Carlos Hyde. Seems like he kind of shocked everyone week 1, I wish I would have mentioned him in my video last week. I didn't really get interested in him until the end of the week, leading into Sunday, and I only had him in a few lineups. So, So yes, that kind of sucked. I only had him in like maybe 5% of lineups or something, or less, maybe even like 3% of my lineups. But he was huge. Um, and you know, the 49ers are, I think they're almost 7 point. They're 6.5 point underdogs. So that's a little bit of a concern. Also, the Steelers are usually pretty good against the run at home, but the Steelers didn't. I mean, they gave up a decent amount of yards to Dion Lewis against the Patriots week 1. Also, the Steelers have more rest since they played Thursday. So initially, I had Carlos Hyde in a decent amount of lineups, and I still do kind of have him in lineups, but I am not picking him in as many lineups now as I was initially, just because of the factors that are playing in. I mean, the Steelers, they're more likely going to be forcing Kaepernick to throw the ball and the 49ers to throw the ball than to, I mean, they definitely don't want to get beat on the ground, but if they do, and, then Carlos Hyde's going to be the guy to do it, and I think he can. I think if Carlos Hyde, runs the ball effectively, then the 49ers have a great chance of winning this game. Or if or if Anquan Bolden steps up for Kaepernick, and Kaepernick has to step up too, then they could possibly beat the Steelers. But they still 7 point underdogs is a lot to cover. I'm just gonna touch on Chris Ivory. Initially, I kind of liked him against the Colts because their run defense is weak, and he's only at 4,700, but he's having some injury issues. Also, I think in another article on Rotoworld, I read that Chris Ivory had the most yards week 1 after contact. I think so. He had 91 yards rushing. I think the article said he had like 80 yards after contact. It's just ridiculous. So if he's healthy, he's good. But at 4,700, there's other running backs that I like a lot at 4,500 that I'm going into next, and I just can't take. For me personally, I think I might be fading him just because I don't want to take the risk of taking him and then him being injured and then having no one to flex out Monday night. Also, the Jets are 7 point underdogs against the Colts, and it's in Indianapolis, so game flow doesn't really bode well for Chris Ivory. I mean, if the Jets were going to beat the Colts, it would probably be with Chris Ivory, game clock management, all that stuff. But it kind of seems like, Chris Ivory isn't going to play. They're in some trouble. So the Jets might have to air the ball out in Indianapolis. That kind of makes sense. If they're 7 point underdogs and they're behind, they're not going to run the ball. All right, next up, Ameer Abdullah. There's a lot to like about Ameer Abdullah. He is very explosive, and he's getting receptions as well, so that's really good. That's a huge plus. The only knock against him really is that it's a running back by committee with the Lions. And I'm a little surprised the Lions are 2 point underdogs, but that's not much of a. I don't think that's too big of a deal. Also, the Lions are playing the Vikings, who are on a short week, and the Vikings just got destroyed by Carlos Hyde. So, it kind of does factor in that the game flow here for the Lions kind of does work better if they can run the ball against the Vikings, because the Vikings supposedly have a pretty strong pass defense. So yeah, I mean, Abdullah, it looks like he's also returning kickoffs and stuff too. So, yeah, which is another. Was it Abdullah? Yeah. So it looks like things are really trending up for Ameer Abdullah. Read his profile and stuff, and see what you think. But I really wouldn't be too surprised if he gets more than 11 touches against the Vikings. I mean, I'm really kind of surprised that the Lions are even 2 point underdogs in this game. So I like Ameer Abdullah a lot at 4,500. I have him in a good bit of lineups. He is kind of a high risk play, only because they're running back by committee. If they weren't running back by committee, then he wouldn't be as much of a kind of boom or bust player. But there's a lot to like about him, and he's trending up. So this might be, if he blows up week 2, this might be the cheapest you can get him again for a while. All right, Tevin Coleman. He wasn't on my radar at all during the preseason too much. I didn't really know much about him, but it looks like he played really well against the Eagles, and the Eagles have a good run defense from what I understand. I thought their front seven's really good, so pretty solid to get 20 rushes for 80 yards. And I mean, it's even just a good sign that he got 20 rushes. He's way ahead of Devontae Freeman. So, yeah, and the Falcons are going up against the Giants, who are not. Their run defense is pretty weak, and I mean, the Cowboys would have ran the ball a lot more against the Giants week 1 if the Cowboys were winning, but they were just because of crazy turnovers and stuff. The Giants were up, so the Cowboys had to throw the ball more. But yeah, I think Tevin Coleman might be a really nice pick this week. The only thing is, he doesn't look like I'm not sure if he's getting receptions. Now again, they're not gonna. If the Falcons are throwing the ball, they're usually gonna throw it to Julio, and the Falcons were also up against the Eagles, so they'd rather just run the ball, eat up the clock than take a risk at passing it and have an incomplete pass. So yeah, Tevin Coleman at 4,500 I think is a solid pick this week. My only concern with him is not getting any receptions, but he could be really good against the Giants. All right, so David Johnson, I don't really have him in many lineups, or hardly any really, but it doesn't sound like he's gonna. It's just weird. Like, I don't understand why Bruce Arians wouldn't want to have David Johnson splitting carries with Chris Johnson. But this is really, I'm just calling him out. He's only 4,200. He's going up against a weak defense, but his touches are going to be super limited. I mean, look, he only played last week for only 5 snaps or something. So I don't really recommend putting him in any lineups really, but I'm just calling him out because he could blow up pretty soon. I mean, it is possible that Bruce Arians could just be saying this, but yeah, I just kind of wanted to point him out because I think he's going to have a bigger role moving forward. And I mean, he's just a pick. Like, if you think for some crazy reason, Chris Johnson isn't running the ball effectively, so they take him out and they give Johnson a chance, and he just goes crazy, in the second half. And again, if the Cardinals are up 3 touchdowns, why not give David Johnson, your rookie running back, a chance to really see what he can do, right? So really, this is just a punt play, sort of. If you're playing with, if you start David Johnson, super boom or bust, But hey, just thought I'd throw that out there if you're interested in someone that's going to be picked less than 1%, and probably should be picked less than 1%. All right, Danny Woodhead, he was awesome for me week 1. I had him in my value picks running back video, and he was great. 3,700, he was worth 23 points. Now this week, I think he's still pretty good. He's 4,000, but to be honest, I don't have him in a lot of lineups. He's going up. I think this is going to be a tougher game for the Chargers. And I mean, the good thing about Danny Woodhead, he gets receptions. That's a point automatically. And the other good thing is that he was getting targeted in the red zone while Gordon wasn't. So, and there are a lot of good things coming out during preseason about him. But at 4,000, I kind of like to stretch a little higher for Abdullah or Coleman than to take Woodhead. So I don't have Woodhead in a lot of lineups. That might, hopefully it doesn't hurt me. I do feel like Danny Woodhead's ceiling is a bit limited, especially in this game against the Bengals, and he is kind of splitting carries. So he isn't like his ceiling for points is not as high as I think it is for Abdullah. So I'd rather take Abdullah or other players than Woodhead, but yeah, at 4,000 he is a respectful price. Just use him sparingly. And here again, Darren Sproles, you might want to use him sparingly as well. He had a lot of receptions last week. And again though, the game flow though was in favor of Sproles, at least for the Eagles to throw to Sproles. If the Eagles are, dominating this week, dominating the Cowboys this week, then they're probably just going to run the ball. I mean, maybe not. You never know. I mean, Sproles is only 3,500 though, so that's really cheap. And he got 12 touches last week, so he could get around the same again, and he could be worth around the same again, which would be really, would be great at 3,500 if he's worth 19 points again. But I do feel like his ceiling is a bit limited too. But again, if you need someone really cheap for a good price, he's a good price. But who I like better for the 3,000 point range, I like Carlos Williams a lot. It looks like LaShawn McCoy is hurt and he's really not playing that well. And Carlos Williams is a good rookie. And he's on an offense that wants to run the ball a lot. So yeah, he's splitting carries, but it's really wouldn't take much for McCoy to get hurt and for him to step up and take over in this game. So, because just the stuff coming out about McCoy just does not sound good. So I'm taking a chance with Carlos Williams in some lineups. Even if if the Bills kind of control the game pretty well with the defense, then he could get more touches this week. So we'll see. I mean, he is a boomer bust player, but again, he's only 3,300. So take your chances if you want to. And finally, at the minimum price, Lance Dunbar at 3,000. He got a lot of receptions last week, and he just seems solid. I watched the game and he looked pretty good. So not a high ceiling, but he might have a decent floor, especially if the Eagles are projected. They're 5.5 point favorites, I think. Yeah, so if the Cowboys are trailing again, like they were last week against the Giants, then Lance Dunbar could get some targets his way like he did, week 1. So, but again, he's bare minimum price. I have him in some lineups, but not as many as I used to because I think there's just so much value in these other running backs to be worth 30 points or more, maybe even, or even a 4,500 point player being worth 30 points would be huge. And I don't quite see that with Lance Dunbar. It's possible, but yeah. So, all right, that wraps it up for week 2 for running backs. Let me know if I missed anybody and who you like week 2. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm just kind of giving you my perspective on week 2, and yeah, just kind of trust your instincts, use the players you like. Hopefully I showed you some players that maybe you weren't thinking about before, and hopefully you got to see some players that might be good for week 3 or down the road. And yeah, thanks for watching.